Wow, I can't believe how much interest there is right now in single stage reloading presses. Gavin Gear here from ultimatereloader.com. I've got something special for you in this video. What I have here is the world's very first production sample of the all-new coaxial reloading press from Frankford Arsenal. It's called the M Press. It's a coaxial design. This is kind of a unique design. It's above the table, the entire press. Handle swings down, needs just a little bit of clearance off the edge. It's got an integrated LED light. It uses quick change die blocks, so you don't have to screw the dies in and out. You can actually flip the linkage on this, and you can toggle between a cam over type action and a positive stop type action. It's got a removable spent primer tray. There's kind of a lot here to see, so let's actually get this box open. I have not taken this out of the box yet. You guys are seeing this with me like I always do for the first time. This is so new, I don't even have an owner's manual yet. I had to get a digital copy from Frankfurt Arsenal. So this is the die block set and the die block box. What's nice about this is that if you've ever put Lee bushings or Hornady bushings on dies, they don't fit into the factory cases for a lot of the different brands of dies. When you get the die blocks, you get the case with it that will sit on the shelf. You can write on here with a Sharpie to label those. That is awesome. Oh, and there it is. Oh, this is cool. Sorry, I never get tired of this, the sort of process of seeing one of these things for the first time. Wow. Okay, and one of the die blocks is actually in the press. I was wondering why there was only two in the, ooh, that's nice. Wow, that feels really good. Okay, so this is kind of an interesting detail. It uses a micro USB power supply, and it comes with the wall block, the voltage adapter. So what's cool about that is, let's say you're out in the middle of nowhere and you don't even have power. Let's say you're one of these people surviving in Alaska, kind of shows I like to watch. You can actually run this off of batteries. Or if you just don't have an outlet near your reloading area. Wow, this is really cool. Okay, so here's the handle. Looks like I need to tighten a set screw there. Okay. So that is what comes with the press. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take a moment to read the PDF instructions. I'm going to get familiar with the features on this guy. I'm also going to take measurements, which I'll include in the blog post, for the bolt pattern so that I can drill my inline fabrication quick change top plate, and then we'll get to work with it. So give me a minute. Okay, so I'm really glad that I had some extra generic inline fabrication quick change top plates available, because I was able to use the milling machine, the Precision Matthews PM949 TV, and the DRO after taking some very careful measurements of the hole pattern on the press. All I had to do was mark the pattern out as a rough template, I made the precise measurements, and then I used the digital readouts to precisely locate each hole. I did a pre-drill, I did a 3/8 drill, and then I countersunk the holes, checking with the countersunk bolts, which you'll need with the generic plates in order to mount a press with the generic plate or a bench vise or whatever it is that you want to mount. Normally that hardware comes with the top plates. So it lined up perfectly, which I always love, and I finished setting up the press. It's basically just a matter of mounting it and then running your micro USB cable down to an outlet with the wall adapter. This little switch here turns the light on and off, and it's feeling really good. I really like the action of the press, and I discovered that you kind of have to raise the carriage all the way to the top in order to tip out the spent primer tray. These little tricks that we learn as we get going. And another thing, so we're going to start with 223. My thought is we're going to size some 223, actually 556 military brass from Capital. if you remember from my 223 versus 556 video, I have these huge sacks of 556 brass to process. And so I thought I'd get a jump start here with that. With the dies, I'm going to use a set of Redding dies. I've got a 223 Remington Sizer D primer. This is their standard die. And then I've got a competition cedar die because we're going to want to check our bullet runout or concentricity because that's one of the advantages of using a press like this with some float. These die blocks float just a little bit so that you get enhanced alignment between the shell casing and the die. You don't need lock rings. That's the other thing, because these blocks essentially are the lock rings. Now I'll make one more note. Since this press is imported, it actually uses metric Allen keys for tightening and loosening the different set screws on the press. That was true for the set screw that holds the handle in, and I noticed on the die blocks the same thing. There's a little spring detent here that keeps the die block in its position. It has a little bit of float, like I mentioned. This essentially is the lock ring, and it takes a 2.5 millimeter Allen key to work in and out the set screw, which is going to preserve your die setting. So the first thing we're going to do is put the block in, and we're going to start screwing our 223 Sizer die in. And then we're going to need to make the appropriate adjustments to kind of the shell holder area. This is a generic shell holder. You don't have to have conventional shell holders. So let me bring you up close and we'll zoom in here to see how that's done. Okay, so the way that the universal shell holder system works here on the M-Press is that there's circular plates with different cutouts. Each side has a small, a large, a 308, and a 223 cutout on it. And we can either spin these by hand, or I've found that a wrench actually is a nice way to do it. So if I go from small here, and I rotate that counterclockwise 90 degrees, we're on 223. We can do the same over here. Now we've got 223 and 223 showing, and that should grab our case nice and snug. Awesome. So let's go ahead and finish setting up our die. I will note here that I have something special. This is totally new, just picked this up hours ago. New brass case gauges from Ellie Wilson. And these are nice because A, they look cool, and also they don't corrode like steel does. So they might tarnish a little bit like a brass case, but you don't have to worry about rust at all. This is a 223 case gauge, and anytime we set up a sizing die, we're going to want to have an appropriate case gauge on hand. Now, I've sprayed these with lube. I'm going to spray this first one with just a little bit of extra, just to kind of get the die wet down. And we're going to crank this die down until it hits the shell holder, and then we're going to back it off just a little bit. We have to be a little bit careful about crushing this universal shell holder plate system, and we don't want that to happen. So before I tighten the ring, let's go ahead and size a case here. Okay. And it looks like my decapping rod needs to go down a little bit more, and that could be that the die needs to be a little bit deeper as well. So let's check that with a rough check here. Okay, yeah, sizing die is still just a little bit too high. Let's bring that down, hit that again. Okay, now we got a good D-prime going that time. Okay, and how are we looking? We still need to come down just a little bit. Go ahead and do that. Just want to make sure, okay, we're still good here. We're not crushing the plates yet, and that's a good thing. Okay. All right. And now we look good. We're between the two steps on the die. So let's go ahead and take some more cases, and we'll go ahead and size those. All right, time to cruise through some of these. so far, feels really good. And okay, just making sure that I'm managing my primers here. Okay, that last one obviously wasn't with the primer. You know, this thing works really good. I got to make sure that my case doesn't bounce there. It's got great leverage, that's for sure. Can definitely size these cases without thinking about it too hard. One thing I'm thinking about is what's the optimum height here? And I would say I've possibly got this just a little bit too high, because you can see the expander balls coming through right here, which is at kind of an awkward angle. So I would either go a little bit lower or a little bit higher. This is the inline fabrication micro ultra mount. But I'll have to use this some more and see if maybe I like this position or not. You know, I kind of don't mind the left-handed operation, to be honest. I'm used to doing this right-handed, but I kind of like the idea of wearing out my arms and hands evenly. Okay, I've further perfected my rhythm here. And what I've found here with the nature of this expander ball and the motion of the press is I'm coming up with a little bit of velocity. And if I come up with a little bit of velocity, I can pop right through that expander ball portion of the handle motion. So it's really just all about practice makes perfect. All right, well, so this is about 50 cases or so. I didn't count them. I wanted to run it for a while just to make sure that I was completely comfortable with kind of initial impressions on the press. There we go. So there we have our bucket of brass. I just did some lanolin lube. This is the mech lube that I showed recently, and that is smooth. That is real nice. Let's take a quick look at the primer tray. So there we go. There's our spent primers. We can throw those in the trash can. No problem. Now let's take a look at seating bullets. And I want to do two things. I want to look at the motion and the forces involved, which I know are going to be good based on what I've seen here with the sizing. But then I also want to look at the concentricity. And that's why I picked this Reading Competition cedar die, is because it's got the sliding collar, it's a precision die, and that's gonna give us a really good evaluation of the kind of concentricity we can expect with 223. So let's set up that die now. Okay, so I'm just gonna rough dial in the seating die, and then we'll seat bullets for 10 cartridges, and then test a couple on the Hornady concentricity tool. So the cool thing about this, we just pop the die out. There's a little ball detent here, and that keeps the die block captured in the press. So when you put it in and out, it just kind of pops over that little detent ball, which is pretty sweet. Okay, so now we can put our next die block in. We're just gonna go ahead and screw the die down. So that's good to see. This is a really tall die, just starting to go in, and we still have clearance to get the handle over the top of it. Okay, we're gonna screw this in until the actual base of the die hits the shell plate, and then we're gonna back it off a little bit. Let's go ahead and lock the lock ring, because we shouldn't need to mess with that setting now. Okay. Alrighty. Okay, so let's just see, make sure that we're not going to hit anything. Nope, that feels good. And we'll just go ahead and back the die off a little bit. In fact, I'm going to make a little bit of an optimization here. We're going to rotate the die so that we can see the scale. That makes sense. Okay. The die is going to pop in and out. We'll back the seating plug out a little bit. And I'm not going for anything exact here. Of course, we'd want to start with a cartridge that we had previously loaded or something like that. Okay. That's going to be fine so that we could get the bullet seating depth correct. Okay, so I'm going to load it a little bit long like that so that we can test our concentricity. Let's go ahead and seat 10 of these. Wow, that's slick. I always say that when I'm seating bullets because compared to sizing, it really is slick. But that feels really good. Okay. Get my flow down here. Okay, so what I want to do is raise the handle a little bit. That's going to center the case. Then I place the bullet. That's going to be a pretty slick way to do it, I'm going to say. Okay. Yeah, I'm liking that. Okay. Raise the handle. Yep, that's going to give us that centering we need. All right, let's check for concentricity. Okay, so let's take a couple cartridges and see where we're at here. So here we're at, wow, that's pretty good. Plus or minus about 1/2 of a thousandth on that one. And plus or minus 1 on that one. Plus or minus 1 plus a hair. Okay. Really, really good. That was about plus or minus a little bit less than 1/2, I'd say. Okay, there's about plus or minus 1. So in the end, we're at about plus or minus 1/1000th of an inch for 2/1000ths total indicator reading. That's really, really good. When we're done with our dies, we just pop the last one out of the press, and then they go into this included case in kind of an alternating pattern. I will note here that this is an extremely long die, this Reading Competition cedar die, and it does fit, but it's a bit snug. And of course the case closes, which is nice, and now we can stack this on the wall with our label in the front. So let's load some military 308, some 7.62 by 51. All right, time for some military 308. Again, I've got some brass here from Capital Cartridge. This is once fired 7.62 by 51. And in fact, I'm thinking about doing a video on 7.62 by 51, the NATO spec versus 308 Winchester, the civilian spec. So stay tuned for that. Okay, so we've got our once fired brass. I've lubricated this with the lanolin lube yet again. And what we need to set up our dies is a die block set. Now each of these die block sets comes with a case, and it comes with 3 die blocks. So if you're only using 2 dies per rifle cartridge that you're reloading, obviously you can buy 2 of the die block sets and accommodate 3 different cartridges that you're going to load. Okay, so we're going to take one of the die blocks and pop that into the press. And then for this, I'm using a small base RCBS 308 die set. And I wanted to do that because when I size this military brass, sometimes it takes a small base sizer in order to get it down to the right kind of spec so that it will feed reliably in an AR-10 or feed smoothly in a bolt gun. Okay, so I've got the sizer deprimer here. We're going to go ahead and raise the carriage to the top here, screw our die down. Okay, and it looks like our set screw is tight, so we're going to take our 2.5 millimeter Allen key and then continue to tighten that down. I will note here that I have changed the quick change universal shell holder plates to 308. Again, you just spin these. Here we are at small. You can spin that back. Now they both say 308. It's just that quick. Okay, so we've got our die just about set here. Okay, a little bit of pressure there. I'm just going to tighten the lock ring on our die block here. The set screw on the die block. It's not exactly a lock ring. Okay, now we're going to take one of our pieces of once fired lubricated military 7.62 by 51. Send it through there. First one is usually going to be a little stiff. Pop it in here. Looks like we need to come down just a little bit more once again. Okay, screw that in a little bit. Okay, let's give that another pass here. Smoother that time. Okay, and that's a little bit better. Okay, so let's go ahead and size. A little bit more effort compared to the 223, but not too bad. Some depriming as well. Okay. Helps with this to have two hands because this is a lot more intense of a sizing process. Okay. What I've noticed also is, again, it helps to raise the carriage just slightly. That's going to center the case. It's going to self-center and then go into the die. If you go too quickly at the very beginning, the case can still be stabilizing when it goes up into the die. So it's all about that rhythm. All right. And there we go. So I'm going to get the die set up for seating, and then we'll seat some bullets, do another concentricity test. Okay, so I got the seating die set up. Now it's time to seat the rest of these test cartridges. And again, I've seated the bullets just a little bit long because I want to optimize this bullet seating test for the Hornady run-out gauge. And again, very slick. Raise the ram a little bit to center the cartridge, the shell casing in the universal shell holder, and then drop the bullet in, nice and smooth. I will say having the LED light on the press is a huge plus. It really makes it easier to see what's going on. A note about concentricity, this is military brass, so the case mouth and the neck thickness is going to vary, sometimes by as much as 1/1000. So I will leave further testing on the table for subsequent stories. I thought it'd be a good idea to do this testing. Okay, so there's our military 308 dummy cartridges. Let's do the concentricity test. Okay, so let's grab a couple cartridges here, these dummy cartridges, and see what they will do here. Okay, so we're at about probably 1/1000. Yep, almost 2/1000 plus or minus on that one. Yeah, even more of a swing on this one. So I'm gonna attribute this to a couple things. This is not as good a result as we had on the 223. I think, well, there's one that's pretty good there. We have more case neck thickness variation with this brass potentially, but also those Reading competition seating dies are going to perform a lot better. I wanted to try two versions with this press, two different types of dies, just out of interest. But I'll do a follow-up here to see with match grade dies and match grade brass what we can do. So another thing I wanted to talk about was the ability with this press to toggle between cam over and positive stop actuation of the press. And what you do is you rotate these plates And you can tell based on whether the thin portion is at the bottom or the fat portion is at the bottom which mode you're in. I just converted this over to positive stop, and in order to do that, what you need to do is under the press here there's set screws which you loosen. You then remove a circlip here at the top, an E-clip, and that enables you to pop the two pins and the linkage off the side. You got to be careful about a little washer that's in line in the bottom between the plate and the press body. And you then flip the plate and put the bottom pin back in. You can tighten the screw then or at the end. On the top, you got to also get that E-clip back in to secure the pin. So it's really just dependent on whether you have that fat portion at the top or at the bottom. So I've got positive stop here. That means the press is just going to come to a halt. It's not going to cam over. The default, these presses ship with kind of a cam over action because that's probably the more popular option. Okay, one more thing I wanted to do, and this is probably what you are all wondering, is this is a similar style press to the Forster coax. So I wanted to put them side by side so that you can see them next to each other. So here it is. You guys asked for this on Facebook when I announced I'd be covering the M-Press. This is the coax from Forster and the Frankford Arsenal M-Press side by side. They look very similar, but there's actually quite a few differences between the two. The similarities, though, are they're both cast iron construction. They're both coaxial designs with double rods and side plates. They both operate in roughly the same manner. The Frankford Arsenal does have the toggle between the cam over and the positive stop, which I just showed you, which the coax does not. The coax has on-press priming, which the M-Press does not. The M-Press has the on-press LED light, which the coax doesn't. The coax is made in USA, whereas the M-Press is imported. And how they sit on the bench is actually a little bit different as well. The coax hangs over the front edge of the bench, but the M-Press is above the bench. Although it needs to be close to the front edge or it needs to be elevated so you have clearance for the ball handle on the end there as it swings down, which is actually the same with the coax here. The capacities, the Forster coax is about 3.9 inches opening, whereas the M-Press is about 4¼ inches opening. And in terms of how they operate, they just feel a little bit different. It's kind of hard to describe in a way. But, you know, the coax is a little bit higher price point, which makes sense because it's made in the USA, whereas the M-Press is available at a lower price point. There's so much demand for the coax that they can be hard to get. I've been told that the M-Press will have plentiful stock. And again, in February, we'll have to see kind of what the situation is for that. So here's another thing that you guys are going to want to see. Make sure you're subscribed because very shortly, I'm going to have the most insane side-by-side single-stage press comparison video that you've ever seen. We're talking about 14 presses side-by-side. Guess what two presses are going to be in that lineup? These two. For 2019, I'm also giving away something every week here on GavinTube. So again, make sure you subscribe to GavinTube with notifications. I'm going to have more Frankford Arsenal content coming up. They got a lot of killer new products that they're announcing at SHOT Show this year that will be available shortly thereafter. I've got a lot more stories coming up. This has been so fun. If you want to show your support to me and to GavinTube, you can buy one of these Ultimate Reloader shirts at the Ultimate Reloader store. Plus, you can support me on Patreon. See the link in the video description. If you liked this video, please, by all means, give it a thumbs up. And until next time, happy shooting and happy reloading.